I'm Selina from the Hong Kong Federation of Insurers. We are very, very pleased to have this annual event now. Is becoming an annual event. I'm told that we have a full house today with 105 participants, but I still see some spare seats, so I think these will be filled. For those in the back, if you don't have any seats, please come up because we have spare seats over here. In order to give Peter all the time he needs, so I'm going to do a quick introduction. We all know Peter Gregor. He used to be the general counsel and the head of market conduct before he decided to ditch us and go back to England. So he's back last year as well for another training. So this is the fourth time for him to do a intensive training for us. The two previous ones were for insurance agents, but these two were for KPIMs. So you are very important because you are in charge of intermediaries and you're managing them. So the IA has, Alan and Peter has produced this very, very intensive, very solid handbook for us to understand more about their compliance, their regulatory policies and philosophies. And I read it yesterday, and I think it's pretty interesting. Very Peter. The introduction talk about French Revolution. I don't think any other regulator would say something like this. If you have read, you know, you understand what I'm saying. We had less than 100 people attending last year. This year we have 105, and some of those who cannot make it. I was a bit skeptical about the date because it's right after the Easter holidays. I think lots of people are still on leave. So some people have already called in and said, do we have a rerun? We do have a rerun. So after today, we are recording the whole proceedings. So after today, if you think your colleagues should be learning this as well, let us know. We'll do a rerun. And without much further ado, I would like to invite our very important guest speaker, Mr. Peter Gregor, on the stage. Thank you for coming all the way back from England to do it. Thank you.
Oh, pleasure. Okay, well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to the HKFI for organising this session again this year. It's a real pleasure to be with you in Hong Kong again, to reconnect with so many friends, and it's a real honour. Can't hear me.
Is it better?
Hello? Yeah, better? Is that better? Okay, good. Yeah, right. The people at the back, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So it's a real honour to have this opportunity to give this training again. I do really mean that because I tell you, even though I've left Hong Kong and I've left the insurance industry here, it feels that neither Hong Kong nor the insurance industry has left me. Both are embedded deeply within my soul. They're always there, reminding me that no matter what I do, I still, for some reason, care about the Hong Kong insurance market. So having this opportunity to make a tiny bit more of a contribution is something that I'm really very grateful for. Now, those of you who attended last year's training might remember that we finished on this slide here, which sums up the key person in intermediary management role and the areas that a key person needs to establish controls in. And this, I think, is where we can pick up again this year, because we've taken this one slide and we've turned it into this, okay? Because we come bearing gifts, as Selina said. Today, we're presenting all of you with a physical copy of the IA's new handbook for key persons in intermediary management for authorised insurers. And it is essentially based exactly on the structure of this slide that we finished last year's training with. Now, I'm going to explain more about this handbook in a moment. But I know that when it came out in soft copy form, there were a few comments about it being very long. But let me just tell you that at a mere 195 pages, it's less than 1% of the Financial Conduct Authority's handbook in the UK. So I think we can keep your complaints proportionate, please. And it's actually very different in status from any other handbook that's issued by any other regulator. So please keep that in mind. Now, can I ask, has anybody had a chance to read the handbook or any part of it? Any please, show of hands? 1, 2. Oh, good. Okay, there's some of you. Thank you very much for reading it. That's very useful information for me to know. Now, this handbook, it does represent something significant. It represents how the key person in control function for intermediary management has matured in status and sophistication over the 7 years since the role was first introduced on the 23rd of September 2019. Back then, when the new conduct regime came into force, all the focus was on the intermediaries themselves. But in truth, what actually changed for agents and brokers on that date, 23rd of September 2019, was not very much at all. The IA had largely translated all the requirements of the self-regulatory regime into the guidelines and codes that the IA issued. So for intermediaries, it actually wasn't that much of a change. The real change, the genuinely new requirement, was one that applied to you, the insurers. Every insurer doing business through insurance intermediaries was suddenly required to have this thing called an intermediary management control function and to appoint a key person responsible for it. That person needed to be fit and proper and needed approval from the IA because of the personal accountability that you were taking on. So here was a new specialist compliance function focused on insurance intermediaries. Its role was to establish internal control measures and ensure the intermediaries through which an insurer did business, both agents and brokers, complied with the conduct requirements in the insurance ordinance, the codes, and the guidelines that the IA issued. This was where the real substance of the change that took place on September 2019 happened. And as we explain in Chapter 1 of the handbook, the key person in intermediary management role, it's unique to Hong Kong. There's no reference to intermediary management as a control function in the insurance core principles of the International Association of Insurance Supervisors. So this role is not borrowed from international standards. It's a Hong Kong original. And unlike the other key person in control function roles, risk, actuarial, finance, compliance, internal audit, which do come from international standards and sit firmly in the second or the third line of defense, the intermediary management function sits in the first line of defense. It's both a business function and a compliance function. And the key person in intermediary management will always feel that tension between driving business performance of agents and brokers on the one hand and ensuring their compliance on the other. That's why I see a lot of tired faces out there because of that tension and stress. Because as we all know, the vast majority of Hong Kong insurance business is intermediated through the 120,000 plus agents and brokers here. They are the public face of the insurance market. They're the ones who source and deal with policyholders. They set the standards for the insurance market's reputation for trust or otherwise. And this makes your role, the key person intermediary management, a frontline guardian of both the insurers and the wider insurance market's reputation for trust. That's something we really need to constantly emphasize to you, because you are performing a very important role. Now, because this important key person in intermediary management role was brand new and unique to Hong Kong, of all the key person roles, it was the one that required most guidance. And yet at day one, back in September 2019, it was the role for which there was zero guidance. There were no precedents we could draw from other countries. And frankly, in the lead up to the transition, it had not been at the forefront of anyone's mind. Let me ask this question to you guys. How many of you are first-generation key persons in intermediary management? How many of you were appointed back in September 2019? Anyone? One of you. Okay, we have one first generation of key person in intermediary management here. Welcome. I'm sure, having accepted the appointment back then, you're probably wondering, what am I supposed to be doing? Well, I tell you, the IA was asking the same thing back then. And it was to address this lack of guidance that when I became the head of market conduct division, I made it a priority to develop practical guidance for the key person in intermediary management and to cultivate that role, because it was through the key person in intermediary management role that the real work of raising standards in the market would be achieved. That's why we've run this training session every year. It's why we've made a point to meet regularly with the key persons in intermediary management of the major insurers. It's why we now interview candidates for the role when an application's made. It's why we started Conduct in Focus to share practical lessons from our conduct inspection and supervision work to help key persons in intermediary management to perform their role. And through these mechanisms over the past 7 years, we have helped you evolve the intermediary management function into one that implements practical, forward-looking conduct controls that mitigate conduct risk and cultivate an ethical business culture that aligns with the IA's treating customers fairly philosophy. The market, I think, has responded positively to this. The first generation of key persons in intermediary management, those who put their hands up just now, you embraced your role, and with a little bit of help from the IA's non-compliance CPD league table, we virtually eradicated CPD non-compliance from the market. That's a genuine achievement for the first generation of key persons in intermediary management. Now, how many of you are next generation key person in intermediary management who were appointed at some point after September 2019? Show of hands, please. Okay, we have some of you here. You are, look at you. Yes, I see a lot of young and thrusting faces there. Yes, you, the second generation of key person intermediary management, we've been observing how this second generation bring a different practical control mindset, very distinct from the old chief agency officers and heads of broker management of the self-regulatory era, and that's great to see. And the handbook that we have for you today is the next stage in that evolution. Let me be very clear about the nature of this handbook. This is not a rule book. So it's nothing like the FCA's handbook in the UK. It's not a guideline. It's not a code of conduct. It's not a circular. Not a single new regulatory requirement is introduced by this handbook. What this handbook is, it's intended to be practical guidance, a longer, more comprehensive version of our newsletter, Conduct in Focus, through which we share the lessons and observations and best practices that we've gathered from 7 years of engaging with the key persons in intermediary management and conducting inspections across the market. By sharing these lessons and best practices with you through this handbook, we aim to continue to support the key person in intermediary management role in performing their vital work, because the role you perform is pivotal to the well-being of the Hong Kong insurance market. Now, as I've already intimated, last year's training was actually based on an early draft of the handbook, so I'm not going to regurgitate the handbook today. I intend to do something slightly different. I'm going to go through 4 themes that broadly follow the 4 parts of the handbook. And in doing this, I will identify specific elements that the IA focuses on when it carries out a conduct inspection of an insurer. The IA's conduct supervision team, under Alan Wu's leadership, do an absolutely superb job in their conduct inspections. I couldn't be more proud of what's happened since I left the IA. They make that process beneficial to insurers to drive practical improvement. And I want you to understand what they look for and why in those conduct inspections to approve this. So the 4 themes you have are on the slide there. Theme 1, compliance controls, conduct risk and corporate culture. Theme 2, it's not just about agents, it's about insurance brokers too. Theme 3, it's not just about the sale. And theme 4, it's all about commission. At some point, I have to warn you, I'm going to be blunt and undiplomatic. I'm going to tell you about times when I got very frustrated regulating you. Because deep in my heart, I know we've come a long way, but there's still areas of improvement that we need, and I want to convey that with brutal honesty to you. Any general insurers in the room? Good. We have some general insurers. Well, thank you for coming. And I want to apologize to you in advance because I'm afraid you're going to hear me talk quite a bit about life insurance and participating policies today, which is good from your perspective because, relatively speaking, that's still where we see that's the most unethical part of the market still. But it's not all going to be about life insurance. There's still information relevant to general insurance, which is my first love. But when I'm ranting at you life insurers, the general insurers can sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. So with that introduction, let me get to our first theme. Compliance culture, controls, conduct risk, and corporate culture. And getting the attitude to these things right. Now, the key person in intermediary management role is, as we've said, it's fundamentally a compliance function. Its purpose is to establish effective, practical control measures on insurance intermediaries so that they conduct their regulated activities in accordance with the requirements in the insurance ordinance, the codes, and the guidelines we issue. When we talk about control measures, I think we all have a sense of what they are. They're the documented policies, procedures, technical controls implemented by a business to prevent problems and non-compliances arising during the course of business activities. And throughout the handbook, you'll see we've mentioned a number of control measures. They're usually in these blue tables for ease of reference. And the controls we typically see there on the slide, documented policies and procedures, written contracts with intermediaries, access rights to sales systems, documented suitability assessments, declarations, whether signed by intermediaries or customers confirming certain actions and certain understanding, customer due diligence and due diligence on new agent recruits or broker companies, monitoring conduct data for red flags with set procedures to follow up, random sampling, audits, post-sales calls, governance committees, training, written warnings, disciplinary procedures and root cause analysis, and of course record keeping. A comprehensive control system, drawing on all these types of control measures and more, is indeed part of a robust conduct governance system. But here's the critical point, and this is something I want everybody to take away with them today. Every control you establish must be designed to achieve the right objective. And this is something we look very closely at in our inspections. And if you want to know what I mean by this, I think we'll understand this by doing a poll. Okay, I've got this poll here. I'm not exactly sure how this works, but there's a QR code. You scan it and you answer the question. So I'm going to read the question out and you can then answer it. So which of the following statements is correct? The primary objective of our controls is to protect our intermediaries from disciplinary action by the IA. The primary objective of our controls is to protect the insurer from liability for misconduct by intermediaries. C, the primary objective of our controls is to ensure that we have evidence to defend complaints against policyholders. D, the primary objective of our controls is to ensure we can show the IA we have controls in place when they inspect us. And E, the primary objective of our controls is to protect policyholders and potential policyholders by ensuring our insurance intermediaries carry out their regulated activities in compliance with the insurance ordinance, codes of conduct, and guidelines issued by the IA. Okay? So what you've just witnessed, ladies and gentlemen, is the Peter Gregoire experience with any IT. Right? If it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong with me. Okay? So we have an Excel spreadsheet, right? So yes, correct. The correct answer is E, and I see 99% of you got this right. Well done. That's like our CPD result. I call that technical perfection, so well done. Right. Let's witness the Peter Gregoire trying to get back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so correct answer, E. I'm making a unilateral decision now to abandon the other polls that I have here, yeah? Okay, so, so E is the correct answer, but I'm going to put this, I would put it slightly differently. Every control you design or implement should have two objectives, a primary objective and a secondary objective. Now, the primary objective of each control is to achieve compliance with a particular requirement in the insurance regulatory framework. And every requirement in the insurance regulatory framework serves to protect customers, policyholders, and potential policyholders. So it is correct to say that every control you establish, you should be able to identify when the IA asks you how that control serves to protect customers and the provision in the regulatory framework it seeks to achieve compliance with. So, primary objective, to protect customers. The secondary objective follows naturally from the first. If your control achieves its primary objective of protecting customers, it will, as a consequence, protect the insurer you work for and your intermediaries from exposure to non-compliance and disciplinary action by the IA. Now, the problem that we sometimes see in our conduct inspections is this: some insurers design their controls with only that second objective in mind, and they lose sight of the primary objective. And when that happens, you sometimes end up with a set of controls that at best exist to convince us, the regulator, that you've got controls in place, but at worst, it breeds an attitude across the company and intermediaries that provided they tick all the boxes, they can be left alone to treat policyholders however they want to generate as much business as possible. And that not only defeats the purpose of having controls, it actively institutionalizes unfair customer treatment. And that's a problem. And to highlight this, I want to tell you a story from my time when I was head of market conduct, when this happened. It's one that made me quite angry at the time, and I still think about it and have nightmares about it. So it's a story that doesn't involve a conduct control. It involves an anti-money laundering control, and it shows how quickly a control which should be there to protect against the risk of money laundering and thereby protect customers can be turned into something that actively puts customers at risk. I give you, ladies and gentlemen, the story of the cashier orders. All long-term insurers, I think you know, are subject to the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorist Financing Ordinance. Requires you to establish controls and do due diligence to prevent long-term insurance policies being used as instruments to launder criminal monies. And Guideline 3, issued by the IA, provides guidance on this. However, as with conduct, we, as the regulator, don't prescribe one-size-fits-all controls for this. Rather, you, insurers, you've got the responsibility to design your controls specific to your operations on a risk-based approach. And the primary objective of those controls, in the case of AML, is to reduce the risk of money laundering, protect the integrity of the insurance market for customers who use it. And the secondary objective would follow from that to protect the insurer and the agents from exposure to disciplinary action under AMLO and reputational damage. Now, this specific concern, it was to do with the issue of cashier orders being used to pay premium. A cashier order, as I'm sure you know, it's a bank-issued instrument. It shows the name of the bank, the name of the payee, the insurance company, the amount, and the authorized signatories of the bank. But in many cases, it won't show the identity of the person who's purchased the cashier order to make the payment of premium. And in accordance with AMLO and Guideline 3, if an insurer accepts cashier orders for premium payments, it must have controls in place to identify the person who has purchased the cashier order, because anonymous third-party payments are a money laundering red flag. So that should be the primary objective of the controls, to reduce the risk of money laundering, so customer money is not put at risk. Some long-term insurers who accept cashier order payments to pay premium adopt a threshold approach in their controls. And if the size of the cashier order is above the threshold amount, the insurer does comprehensive due diligence and obtains bank verification on who purchased the cashier order. But if it's below the threshold amount, the insurer accepts a lower level of evidence, a self-declaration by the policyholder saying that they purchased it, which is sometimes confirmed by the agent, because we can all trust agents after all. Now, in principle, a risk-calibrated approach like this, with a threshold, is acceptable. The problem that we found was that some insurers had very, very high thresholds, however, as high as $300,000 US. So a premium payment of, say, 2 million Hong Kong dollars, which was below the threshold, required only the policyholder's self-declaration that they'd purchased it as confirmed by the agent. And when the IA came in and inspected, it took a random sampling of the cashier orders below the $300,000 threshold. Shock horror, we found a significant number had actually not been purchased by the policyholder as self-declared. So essentially the insurers didn't know who had purchased these cashier orders. It could have been third parties looking to wash dirty money through the insurer. The insurers simply didn't know. And even worse, the IA discovered that a number of these cashier orders had actually been purchased by the insurance agents themselves, the very same agents who had declared in writing that the policyholder had purchased them. So essentially, your own agents were using your controls to lie to you, and you had no idea where the agent had got the money from. It could have been from the policyholder, it could have been from an illicit source. And even if the agent had got the money from the policyholder, then the agent was mixing the policyholder's funds with his own funds, and that's a serious conduct breach because it puts policyholders' money at risk of mishandling or even misappropriation. So whoever set that threshold had lost sight of the primary objective of the control, to reduce the risk of money laundering. And by losing sight of that primary objective, the control completely failed. And worse, the control itself had enabled unethical behavior by agents, putting policyholders at risk, putting their premium at risk of being mishandled. So the primary objective abandoned, the secondary objective essentially shielding misconduct. That's not where I got angry, though. Worse was to come. When we raised this with the C-suite management at the relevant insurers, the impression we received was they knew what was happening, that a blind eye was being turned. Even worse, they refused to take down the $300,000 threshold unless the IA came out with a circular stating what the threshold should be. And that's when I got very upset. I did issue a circular in April 2024 prescribing a new threshold, so be brought down to $50,000, which, as we all know, is the annual capital outflow limit for mainland Chinese citizens, because I think we all know what the agents were really doing here. And I made my feelings known in that circular. The IA should not have to prescribe a control like this. It is your responsibility as insurers to set your controls. Instead, we had a lot of life insurers who had essentially outsourced their job and their ethics to us, the regulator. And all of this happened because the persons responsible for designing the control had lost sight of what the primary objective of the control was supposed to be. And this is stated in the last paragraph of that April 2024 circular, so you can go and read that as well as the disciplinary actions that we took as a result. Now, in Chapter 2 of the handbook, we outline a suggested process for how you can design your control measures. And the starting point is to identify the primary objective, which means identifying the specific policyholder protection requirement in the insurance ordinance, the codes or the guidelines that the control aims to achieve compliance with. And you design your control to achieve that identified primary objective, and you measure its effectiveness against that primary objective. By starting with that primary objective of policyholder protection, the secondary objective of protecting your company and your agents will follow. But the primary objective must always come first. That's lesson 1 from the cashier order story. But there's a second and arguably more important lesson from that story. The attitude of the insurers involved and their C-suite management told the IA a great deal about the corporate culture and the culture of the agency force. Business first, policyholder protection second. But your policyholders are your business. The premiums that they pay fund your salaries, your commission, your bonuses, your shareholder profits. If your intermediaries treat customers fairly, act in their best interests, and don't take advantage of them, customers will trust and buy from you. Your business will thrive, and so will the reputation of the Hong Kong insurance market. And this can be summed up in one principle: treating customers fairly, the principle on which the entire insurance regulatory framework is founded. Now, as we explain in Chapter 3 of the handbook, insurance is a vital financial service, but it's quite a complex one. Insurers and intermediaries have specialist knowledge that policyholders do not. This imbalance of knowledge creates a risk of customers being taken advantage of. The treating customers fairly principle exists to redress that imbalance and ensure the insurance market is fair. It does this by imposing duties and obligations on insurers and intermediaries to act in the customer's interests, take account of their circumstances, and put them in a position to make informed decisions on their insurance purchases. So this treating customers fairly principle, it's got to be a living and breathing part of your corporate culture, because it's your culture, the attitudes, the norms, the behaviors of your intermediaries and your employees that will ensure that your controls achieve that primary purpose of policyholder protection and are not used to mask unethical behavior, as we saw in the cashier order story. Or to put it another way, a culture of treating customers fairly is your most important control measure. And the handbook says this very clearly: a strong corporate culture which imbues everyone working for and representing the insurer with a treating customers fairly mindset serves as the ultimate control measure. And this is where your personal responsibility as key persons in intermediary management is most acute. Because in our conduct inspections, yes, we do examine your documented policies and controls to identify their effectiveness in achieving that primary objective of policyholder protection. But we do place equal, if not more, emphasis on assessing your corporate culture. We assess corporate culture by looking at quantitative measures, your values statement, your codes of conduct, how these are cascaded down from your board, how culture is monitored through customer feedback, surveys, complaints, persistency, renewal levels, CPD completion. We look at whether you're living your values, and is that living your values factored in to your performance evaluations and your remuneration for your intermediaries, your C-suite management, and yes, you as your key persons in intermediary management. But it's the qualitative picture that tells us most about your culture. And that comes from the IA spending 6 weeks on site in your offices. 6 weeks is too long a period for a company to hide who it really is. We see your culture in every interaction we have with your staff and management. We see it in the confidential conversations we have with your agents at every level of the hierarchy. 6 weeks, and we know exactly what your culture is. And those of you who've been through a conduct inspection will know that the first section in our conduct inspection report, before we get into the details of your controls, is our observations and our assessment of your corporate culture. We highlight negative observations like evidence of siloed, not my problem attitudes, or controls deliberately designed to be lax to gain a competitive advantage. Cashier order, case in point. We also highlight positives, evidence of self-reporting and transparency, evidence of teams working together to solve or prevent problems, cultural indicators being discussed, considered and measured at governance committees and at meetings between the KPIM and agency leaders regularly. Putting culture first in our inspection reports is deliberate. We know it's the first thing that your board of directors will read, and our comments on your culture will often dictate whether your board sees the outcome of the inspection as positive or negative, because it sets the tone for the detailed observations on your controls that follow. This means, as key person in intermediary management, you've got a primary responsibility for building, modelling, and reinforcing that treating customers fairly culture across your intermediary force every single day. And you need to ensure that your agency leaders in particular do the same, because they are the ones that really are the cultural architects of your entire intermediary force. That really is your leadership obligation. So I've put the theme 1 takeaways on the slide there. I'm not going to go through them. We've just gone through them in detail to catch up time after the IT glitch. I'm going to go straight on to theme 2. Now, in previous years, in the structure of the handbook, as you'll see, I've always focused on controls for key persons in intermediary management that they should establish on licensed insurance agents. And then I've moved on to the controls for licensed insurance brokers. And this is logical because insurance agents are appointed to represent the insurer, and the insurer is liable for their actions. So there should be comprehensive controls on insurance agents. But unfortunately, by putting agents always first, by the time we talk about insurance brokers, you're all tired and you're not really listening. So this year I'm reversing it. We're going to talk about insurance brokers first. And there's 2 main reasons for this. First, the biggest conduct problems that we've seen in recent years on life insurance have involved life insurance broker companies. And secondly, despite almost 7 years having passed since the insurance ordinance introduced the intermediary management function, we still get some insurers who believe that they don't need to establish any controls on brokers. They're stuck in that pre-September 2019 mindset because they think the brokers represent the policyholders rather than the insurers, so we as insurers have got no obligations to put controls on these broker companies. Now, if that's you, you really need to wake up. It's been 7 years. There's no longer any excuse. We've given guidance on this already in the multiple trainings that we've done, in our circulars, in our articles in Conduct and Focus, and now, to remove any residual doubt, we've got it in the handbook, part 3 of the handbook, entitled very clearly, Internal Control Measures for Licensed Insurance Broker Companies. Now, part 3 begins by explaining why the insurance ordinance requires insurers to have controls on broker companies. Yes, brokers do represent policyholders. That's never changed. But it's also been a reality that insurers and insurance brokers are business partners. Insurers rely on brokers' companies to source business. Brokers rely on insurers to underwrite that business. That's been the nature of the insurance market since there's been an insurance market. What this means is that when brokers mess up in arranging your policies, your reputation as insurers is going to suffer. Your fortunes are tied together. So it's very much in your interests as insurers to establish controls on the broker companies you do business with. And the scope of the intermediary management control functions extends to broker companies. Now, in our handbook, we set out a series of general control areas where all insurers should establish controls on broker companies with which they do business, regardless of whether you're a life insurer or a general insurer. And those are shown on the top half of the slide there. Due diligence on the broker company. This would include basic checks on its license to make sure it's licensed in the lines of business that you underwrite, assessing their track record and experience, meeting the responsible officer to understand not just how much business they're going to bring you, but how they do business and what their compliance controls look like. Secondly, documenting roles and obligations. This would be in the form of either a written agreement or terms of business, and it should cover things like who delivers the policy to the policyholder, you, the insurer, or the broker company, and the broker company's role in claims, how renewal notices are handled, are these sent to the policyholder directly or via the broker, and the obligation of the broker to meet the minimum disclosure requirements on its remuneration. Training. The primary obligation rests on the broker company and its TRs to ensure they are trained properly. But it is also in your interest as an insurer to offer training on your products. This can double as both a control and a relationship building exercise. Ongoing monitoring and periodic reviews, so collecting and reviewing management information on broker performance, assessing not only their business result, but also the conduct risk indicators and any red flags. A formal periodic review with the responsible officer to assess how the relationship is going, maybe once or a year, is also an important control. And documenting that review is also important. Remuneration. I just mentioned the need to ensure that the broker company is giving the minimum disclosure on its remuneration to your policyholders. As regards to the structuring and formulation of intermediary remuneration, I shall cover this in more detail in theme 4. Now, in addition to the general controls, the handbook identifies 2 specialist areas where more intensive, bespoke controls are needed. Referral business, especially on long-term insurance targeting mainland China visitors, and I'll come back to this again in a moment, and also where other specialist services are offered by broker companies. So, for example, if the broker companies provide services on ILAS products that go beyond just arranging the policies and involve the broker giving investment advice on the choice of funds and even managing those choices, then you need to establish additional controls. Or if the broker company through another group company is providing a claims handling service for the insurer, then there needs to be specialist controls in place on that. Now, I want to focus on the first specialist area there, referral business, especially on participating policies. This was a topic we covered last year, following our enforcement actions in 2024. Further developments have followed in 2025 as we continue to clean that up, and it remains critical because of the conduct failures. The conduct failures we saw, they represent some of the worst that we've ever seen. And the context of this is on the slide there. Long-term business, in terms of premiums, 90% of the Hong Kong insurance market. Participating business is 80% of long-term business. So this non-compliant referral business model that we're talking about, which focuses on participating policies being sold to mainland China policyholders, was a major factor in the largest part of the Hong Kong insurance market. This was not a peripheral problem. And to remind ourselves of what was going on, we have a case study. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the case of the phantom regulated activities. Here is our cast of characters. We have our referrer, Mr. Zhao, an unlicensed individual in the mainland. We have our innocent customer, Miss Li, mainland China visitor. We have our licensed insurance broker company we've called Elixir Broking, and the TR working for them in Hong Kong. And our fictitious insurer is Wonderful Insurance Company. And it's not there on the slide, but we also have Spring Bloom, which is Wonderful Insurance Company's flagship participating insurance policy. So, Act 1, Mr. Zhao is an unlicensed referrer. He's appointed by Elixir Broking. He's not supposed to give any insurance advice or sell insurance because he's not licensed. He's only supposed to introduce customers to Elixir Broking, and Elixir Broking is then supposed to do all the regulated activities with the customer in Hong Kong. But Elixir Broking offers Mr. Zhao a massive referral fee, 90% of the first-year commission on every customer he introduces who buys the Spring Bloom participating insurance policy from Wonderful Insurance Company, who's the insurer paying the highest commission. Tempted by this, Mr. Zhao ignores the law and aggressively sells Spring Bloom in the mainland. He finds Miss Li, who's initially reluctant to buy Spring Bloom. However, Mr. Zhao, in his sales pitch, promises to pay her a 20% rebate on her first-year premium. And he can fund this, of course, from his 90% referral fee. He doesn't mention that unofficial rebates are prohibited by the IA's Guideline 25. And what does he care anyway? He's not regulated. Well, the rebate gets the deal done. In fact, it's the main thing that Mr. Zhao talks about when advising Miss Li to show her how good a bargain she is getting. He shows her the benefit illustration, yes, for the non-guaranteed benefits under Spring Bloom, but he doesn't spend too much time explaining it. He just tells her she is virtually certain to get these benefits. Act 2, the cosmetic sales and control. So Miss Li, our mainland China visitor, then travels to Hong Kong to Elixir Broking's office to do the paperwork for a new Spring Bloom policy, and Mr. Zhao goes with her. Elixir Broking is actually in the same building as Wonderful Insurance Company. In fact, they've got neighboring offices, and this gives Miss Li a lot of comfort. At Elixir Broking's offices, a technical representative spends 20 minutes with Miss Li, filling in forms. In fact, many of the forms appear to have already been filled in. And then the technical representative instructs Miss Li to sign Wonderful Insurance Company's declaration stating that all regulated activities have occurred in Hong Kong and were given by Elixir Broking. And the TR also asked Miss Li to memorize a script for Wonderful Insurance's post-sales call, confirming the same thing. Now, Miss Li's a little bit unsure about this. After all, it was Mr. Zhao who advised her and sold her the policy in the mainland. This technical representative has given her no advice at all. But the TR tells her this is all perfectly normal. And given that Wonderful Insurance Company is just next door, surely they must know what's happening. So Miss Li does what she is asked. 3 years later, Miss Li receives her annual statement on her Spring Bloom policy. The non-guaranteed benefits are well below the benefit illustration given to her by Mr. Zhao when he advised her to buy. Didn't he say she was virtually certain to get those benefits? And now she's struggling to pay premium. She wished she had thought about this more instead of just listening to Mr. Zhao talk about the rebate. She tries to contact Mr. Zhao, but she can't find him. She contacts Elixir Broking, who refer her to the insurer. Wonderful insurers say they've never heard of Mr. Zhao, and they're surprised by Miss Lee's account. They produce the declaration she signed and the recorded post-sales call in which she confirmed that all the selling was done by Elixir Broking in Hong Kong. It's as if Wonderful Insurer is accusing her of lying to avoid dealing with her concerns. Miss Lee feels helpless and angry. She cancels her Spring Bloom policy at a loss. She will never trust the Hong Kong insurance market again, and she warns all of her friends. So shame on the insurance market in this case study. And if we look at what went wrong here, there's a number of conduct failures we can see. A number from Mr. Zhao, the referrer. He's carried on regulated activities without a license. He's carried out illegal cross-border selling. He's missold the Spring Bloom policy by using a prohibited rebate to distract Miss Lee. He's made misleading misrepresentations about non-guaranteed benefits. And Elixir Broking are also to blame here. They've enabled and incentivized Mr. Zhao to carry on unlicensed, aggressive cross-border mis-selling by paying him 90% commission as a referral fee. Elixir Broking's technical representative, also called in the market a signing TR, has completely failed to carry out any regulated activities properly with Miss Lee when she came to the office. The technical representative has actively prompted Miss Lee, the customer, to confirm all selling has been done by Elixir Broking, so the TR's prompted the customer to lie, so not a good thing. And what about the insurer? Well, Wonderful Insurer, they've structured their commission to front load 90% into the first year on Spring Bloom, which has funded the referral fees and funded the prohibited rebates that have resulted in mis-selling and this poor policyholder outcome. And as regards Wonderful Insurer's controls, the declaration, the post-sales call, these were completely ineffective to protect the customer. Instead of protecting Miss Lee, the controls have concealed the unethical way in which its Spring Bloom policy has been sold. They've been turned against Miss Lee. So this case study is based on a number of cases that we have seen involving this non-compliant referral model. And it reached its peak in 2024, and by that time, we, the IA, had had enough, and we took action jointly with our friends at the ICAC. And when we took that action, the following day, a number of life insurers' share price dropped. And that shows you the link between poor conduct of broker companies, the failure of insurer controls to detect this, and the impact on your company's value and reputation. Now, your group level management, who you report to, we know they care about their share price. So if your local CEOs want to keep the group management happy, they really need to empower and support the key person in intermediary management to place proper controls on broker companies that genuinely protect customers and not turn a blind eye to what is happening, because it was well known in the market what was going on here. And there's a word for that: unethical. Now, our regulatory response to this has been robust, but it's also been quite reasonable, balanced, principle-based. We've not banned referral fees by broker companies entirely. That would, in my view, have been an overreaction. Referral business, when it's performed solely to introduce customers to brokers, is fine. We've also resisted calls from, well, you, the insurers, to prescribe a one-size-fits-all set of tick-box controls that you can implement to cover your backs and continue with business as usual. Instead, what we've done is we've articulated 3 principles which must be followed if a broker company is sourcing business using referrers who are unlicensed. And those are there on the slide. So you've got principle 1. I think you know all these. Principle 1, unlicensed referrers must not give any regulated advice to clients or carrying on any regulated activities or sales activities. Principle 2, broker companies and their technical representatives must carry on all the regulated activities to the minimum standards in the insurance regulatory framework. And principle 3, any payments to referrers by broker companies for introducing clients must be calibrated to be consistent with the referrers not carrying on regulated activities and not being incentivized to do so, and the broker companies being properly resourced to provide regulated advice and carry out regulated activities for the clients being introduced. Each of these 3 principles is focused on protecting policyholders, making sure that they get the proper insurance advice from persons qualified, licensed, and resourced to give it, and not being taken advantage of by unlicensed persons. And your controls must be designed to achieve that primary objective if you want to continue to do business with these broker companies who run referral business. And these 3 principles actually apply to all referral business that broker companies do, whether it's life insurance or general insurance. So the general insurers in the room can benchmark their controls on their broker companies that they source business with who accept referrals to see if they're compliant. But the truth is, this isn't a general insurance problem. It's a life insurance problem because of the sizable commissions which are paid in life insurance that really do drive the unethical behavior that was characterized by these non-compliant broker referral models. So we've gone further for life insurers by setting out the type of controls that they should put in place on broker companies running these referral models to source long-term business, if that is you still wish to take the risk of doing business with these broker companies. And these suggested controls, they fall into the categories, and they're detailed in Chapter 16 of the handbook. You can see them there on the slide. And I've highlighted 3 of them, which are the most important controls that we focus on in our inspections on this area. And I'll come back to remuneration structures in theme 4, but for now I want you to note that we place a lot of emphasis on enhanced due diligence and the periodic ongoing assessments that life insurers need to carry out on these broker companies. These are building block controls for this. Now, enhanced due diligence, that's your upfront preventive control. It's not like the post-sales call or the declaration that I mentioned in the case study, which only comes in after all the harm has been done. Enhanced due diligence can help prevent the harm from happening in the first place. And the objective of your enhanced due diligence is to evaluate whether the broker company's referral business model substantively complies with those 3 principles. You can have a look at page 147 in the handbook for the kind of controls we expect on this. You can also have a look at our circular of May 2024. Now, based on our conduct inspections, I want to give you an example of a really good enhanced due diligence process and one which is not so good. So example A is a weak enhanced due diligence process. You've got insurer A, let's call him, which sends out a questionnaire to the broker company to complete, and many of the questions are on a yes-no basis with boxes to tick. And the evaluation of the due diligence simply involves checking that the broker has ticked the right boxes and said yes to everything. Now, the IA's observation in its inspection report for something like this is that this is a tick box control that lacks substance. It's just there to show the regulator that something is being done. It does not help with really evaluating whether the three principles are being actually met. It's just there to protect the insurer rather than the customers, and it fails on both counts. Then we've got example B. Again, a real control that we've seen, and this is really a strong enhanced due diligence control, where a member of the intermediary management team is tasked with gathering quantitative and qualitative information on the broker company. And quantitative information includes financial statements, the numbers of TRs, the proportion of MCV business the broker does, and other similar financial metrics. Information on the referral fees is also obtained, and the proportion this represents of the broker's total commission. Qualitative information is obtained from visiting the broker company's offices, meeting with the responsible officer and the TRs to understand their controls on their referrers and how the referrers source potential customers without carrying on regulated activities. And then this member of the intermediary management team prepares a comprehensive evaluation report based on all of this information, evaluating whether the broker's referral business can be and is being conducted in line with the three principles. And consideration is given as to whether the type of referrers are able to source clients without carrying on regulated activities, and the referral fee levels are factored into the analysis. Now, the IA's observation when it saw this control in our inspection report, we noted it as a very robust control. The intermediary management function was performing a substantive evaluation of the broker's business model and its alignment with the three principles, and the process aligned with the business objectives of the insurer to build deep relations with broker companies that source good quality business in the correct way. So we know, having seen it, that these types of controls are possible, and we do give very positive feedback in our conduct inspection reports on this in the culture part. And we come away trusting the insurer, and a regulator that trusts you is a very good thing. If you, as a key person, can achieve that, then you really do deserve a very high bonus, okay? Now, the other building block of substantive controls on brokers running referral models is that source these MCV clients is the periodic assessments, the ongoing monitoring. The objective here, again, is to ensure that the referral business model is running in line with the three principles. And we suggest that you monitor certain benchmarks on an ongoing basis for indications to see if there's any unlicensed selling going on. So we've got certain benchmarks that you should use, ratios of applications from the broker company to the number of TRs that it has to assess whether this is in line with TRs carrying on regulated activities properly. Volatility in volumes of business produced by individual TRs is another red flag. So a sudden submission of 12 applications with one TR signature on it in one day is an indication that the broker has not carried on regulated activities properly. Your post-sales call can be used still to complement these. It's another data point. complaints. Do your complainants refer to advice or selling by unlicensed referrers? And please monitor social media as well for obvious red flags. If we see unlicensed referrers circulating menus of rebates on your products, for example, when you see that, please tell your broker companies that you don't tolerate that from referrers. Please also self-report it to us so that we can have the intelligence and maybe try and identify who's doing it. Now, before I move on from referrals, just before we take our break, I want to say a word about the level of referral fees. Now, Principle 3 in our 3 principles focuses on the level of the referral fee that broker companies pay their referrers. As I said, it needs to be calibrated so that referrers are not being incentivized to carry on regulated activities, and the broker company is properly resourced to carry on regulated activities itself. Now, when I first articulated this principle in our May 2024 circular, the reaction was pretty predictable. Can you just tell us a figure, IA, so that we can just, use that figure and get on with it? It was rather like that cashier order thing again. But the thing was, as I foreshadowed in last year's training, we'd already indicated to you what the IA's benchmark was in that May 2024 circular, if you'd read it carefully. The logic had been explained. Commission is the incentive payment a broker company receives for carrying on regulated activities. So if a broker company is giving more of its commission away to a referrer than it's keeping for itself, common sense suggests that the referrer is more incentivized than the broker company to carry on regulated activities. Now, I thought, having written those words, that rather obviously points to a 50% benchmark. But unfortunately not. You were still asking us to put that figure down. So responding to the life insurance industry's demand to be put under even more regulation, we articulated that benchmark in our circular of September 2025. But do not make the mistake that this is a gateway to tick box compliance. It's a benchmark, not a safe harbor. A referral fee above 50% of commission will warrant additional scrutiny, yes, but a referral fee below 50% will not protect you if referrers of the broker company are obviously conducting unlicensed selling and you are turning a blind eye. This remains part of our balanced, principled approach to regulation, which keeps the onus on you, the insurers, and your intermediary management function to design your controls and risk management so as to safeguard policyholders rather than us prescribing one-size-fits-all controls all of the time. So those are our theme 2 takeaways. All insurers must have controls on licensed insurance broker companies they do business with. We have 5 general control areas that apply to all broker relationships: due diligence, documented roles and obligations, training, ongoing monitoring and remuneration. For broker companies running referral models to source business, the 3 principles are non-negotiable. For broker companies running referral models sourcing MCV life business, you really do need robust, enhanced controls to ensure those 3 principles are being adhered to: enhanced due diligence and periodic assessments. These must not be tick box, they've got to be substantive controls, and that 50% referral fee benchmark is a benchmark, not a safe harbor. Right, we've covered a lot already. Go and enjoy a break. Come back in half an hour. What should we say, 11:20? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed your coffee break and have come back refreshed for the second part. The second part won't be as long as the first part, you'll be happy to know. And we're going to start off with our third theme, which is it's not just about the sale. And this is a nice broad theme, which takes us to controls on insurance agents, which is the subject of part 2 of the handbook, by far the longest section of the handbook for 2 obvious reasons. You've got the legal position. Insurance agents represent insurers, so if an agent commits misconduct, the insurer is likely liable for any resulting loss. So this liability is codified and meaningfully expanded in Section 68 of the Insurance Ordinance in a way that makes it very difficult for insurers to escape liability if an agent commits misconduct. And because of this, your primary objective of the intermediary management function is to place comprehensive controls on insurance agents so they comply with the policyholder protection requirements in the insurance regulatory framework. And of course, the other reason for part 2 being the longest section on agents is the numbers. 87% of individual insurance intermediaries in Hong Kong are individual insurance agents or technical representatives of agencies. So in terms of number, agents dominate the market. And in part 2, if you've had a chance to look at it, we go through chapter by chapter 9 areas where an intermediary management function should establish controls on its insurance agents and some suggested controls. And these depend on whether we're talking about individual insurance agents or agencies, and if an agency, what type of agency. So we cover recruitment, onboarding, sales practices, ongoing servicing of policies, conflicts of interest, CPD, administrative reporting requirements and license renewals, disciplinary procedures, self-reporting to the IA. All of these controls actually have already been covered in previous training sessions that we've done, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but what I'm going to do is highlight particular key areas that are the IA's main focus in a conduct inspection. Now, it's kind of strange. Under the theme of it's not just about the sale, here I am talking about sales practices. This is the longest chapter in the handbook, chapter 7, which reflects the reality that selling is where insurers and intermediaries devote the majority of their effort and resources. It's also where most commission is earned and where most conduct risk arises. And this is the case no matter what agency channel we're talking about, whether it's individual agents, bank assurance, or non-bank agencies. And in Chapter 7 on sales practices, we go through a number of topics related to sales practices, collection of premium, cooling off periods, gifts, advice on the imperative of disclosing material facts. All of these topics are where controls should be established. But I want to hone in on the key point when it comes to sales practices, and that is this. A proper sales practice is not just about getting the customer to buy a policy. It's not just about the sale. It's about determining the customer's insurance needs, recommending a suitable policy to meet those needs, and providing clear enough objective information for the customer to make a fully informed decision. So that means there are two main issues that the IA examines on sales practices in a conduct inspection. First, suitability. Are agents carrying out proper substantive assessments of customer circumstances and basing their recommendations on those circumstances? And secondly, informed decision. Are customers given sufficient objective information and adequate time to consider it so they are making genuinely informed decisions? Now, the suitability assessment is the core skill of the insurance intermediary. It's why customers use intermediaries to source insurance. And for long-term business, we have a prescribed financial needs analysis process that needs to be carried out as a minimum standard for assessing suitability. For general insurance, we don't prescribe any particular process, so it's up to you to determine how the suitability assessment is done. Now, I want to give you two scenarios to compare and contrast to highlight the core problem that we sometimes see with suitability assessments. So here they are. Scenario one. The agent assesses the client's circumstances and then finds the policy that best addresses those circumstances. Scenario two. The agent decides which policy they want to recommend and then fits the client's circumstances around it to justify the recommendation. Now, I hope, sorry, it says TR there, it should say agent. I took this from the broker's training I did the other day, okay? So imagine that says agent. But I hope if I were to ask you which one, scenario 1 or 2, is the correct way of doing things, you would all say scenario 1. Good. Everybody's paying attention. That's good to know. But when we review sample cases in our inspections, sometimes we find examples of an agent doing scenario 2. And in truth, it's usually on a long-term policy, probably a participating policy, usually the one paying the largest upfront commission. An agent should not be deciding first which policy to recommend and then engineering the financial needs analysis to fit that policy. That really is a conduct risk. So be very alert to the red flags for this. An agent who generates a benefit illustration on a product for a customer before doing a financial needs analysis is a classic red flag for this. Another is where a technical representative in a bank who has seen how much cash the customer has in their account starts mentioning a particular insurance policy product they should invest in to generate higher return before knowing anything else about the customer. You all know the tricks that agents and TRs can play to stretch a customer's assets and income on paper beyond reality to try and demonstrate affordability in an F&A. You really need to drum that attitude out of your agents through training, constant communication, and yes, culture. Make sure your agency managers are alert to the issue and report it when they see it happening. When we come in and inspect, we need to see suitability assessments in the samples we select that are substantive and objective assessments of customer circumstances that form the basis of the agent's advice and recommendation. Now, what about informed decision? Well, You as insurers know what the downside risks of your insurance policies are. You know that your non-guaranteed benefits may fall short of the numbers in the benefit illustrations. You know which exclusion clauses are often used in your claims to reduce or deny coverage, and which are the topic of most customer complaints. Your agents need to be upfront with customers about these at the time of sale to manage expectations and enable an informed decision to be made by the customer. Information needs to be fed back from your complaints data into your sales practice training so you take account of the lessons learned. And for bank assurance especially, make absolutely sure the customer understands that they are buying an insurance. It's easy to mislead a customer into thinking an insurance product is similar to a time deposit or other investments, but it's not. Don't mislead or blur the line. Make sure customers are being provided with a balanced and full information that they can understand. So, on sales practices generally, suitability assessment and informed decision are very, very important areas to focus on for the intermediary management function. The discussion on sales practices leads on to an observation of a structural issue that underpins much of the conduct risk that we see, and that is on the recruitment strategy on a lot of insurers with traditional agency forces. Our licensing statistics tell quite a clear story. The total number of new licenses granted to individuals continues to grow, despite the fact that licenses now cost money, and despite the fact that we've got all this AI, which is supposed to be replacing agents, but it's never going to replace agents. We know it will never. Yeah, so we've got all these agents coming in. However, 52%, more than half of individuals who are granted a new license don't even make it to the end of their first 3-year license period before they leave the industry. This statistic reflects an industry recruitment strategy which says the more agents we recruit, the more sales we will generate, so go out and recruit anyone you can find. And if they leave after 18 months, who cares? At least they would have sold their parents a policy, bought a couple themselves, and maybe sold one to a sibling or a spouse. Now, it's not the regulator's job to dictate your business strategy. But when a business strategy is generating conduct risk and the potential of poor policyholder outcomes, it is our job to say so. And the conduct consequences do show up in our complaints data. A portion of sales-related complaints we receive involve misleading representations from inexperienced agents who are under pressure to meet targets, poor after-sales service from agents, where there's this sense of abandonment as soon as the policy is sold. That's another source of complaints that we see, often because the agent who sold the policy has already left the industry after 1 year. Not my problem, it's your problem. So I want your input right now in this 3-minute exercise that we're going to do. So I want us to assume that all of you are key persons in control functions for intermediary management, in charge of agents. You look at your statistics and you see that over 50% of the new insurance agents you recruit every year are not even lasting for the full year term of the first license. Your complaints data shows a link between the agents that leave and complaints about the policies not being sold or serviced properly. So, my challenge to you, what controls or strategies can you put in place to address these problems? So please, over the next 3 minutes, you can do something with this thing and input your answers. This is just an experiment, okay? There's no right or wrong answer. I have no right and wrong answer. I just want to gather your view. We've just come out with our latest Conduct in Focus, yeah? And we're already thinking about ideas for the next one, yeah? So I thought I'd get you to write it by giving us input. But these are really good answers. It's sort of aligned with what I've got: better training, corporate culture, monitor senior agents, agency leaders, retaining ratio for new recruits. It's as if you've read the next part of my script, commission spread. I reckon that's one of the IA people who've input that. Cooling off period after, oh, that's in, yeah, oh, that's, you really have read my script. So this is really good stuff. I mean, the type of things that I had, I think were aligned with this. So I had things like enhanced recruitment screening. So you look beyond just the fit and proper requirements. You look at the kind of caliber of the person. Are they able to make it as an agent psychologically? I think that's an important one. Structured mentoring programs, that's one I had down. Deferred remuneration or bonuses past that 3-year period that incentivizes servicing, not just sales. I saw there tracking agent turnover and incorporating turnover rates into agency manager performance and award schemes. That's what I saw there. So I think, yes, these are exactly the type of things that we want to see. So it's great that we've captured those. I think that just goes to prove that I was right about what I was saying about the second generation of key persons in control functions, how you've got this control mindset now, how you're thinking practically about bringing in control. So thank you. I think that's a very useful exercise. In our handbook, we do have suggested a range of controls to manage orphan policies that are left without a servicing agent. And we've got them on the slide there. So notifying policyholders promptly when the servicing agent leaves, formally introducing a replacement servicing agent, tracking allocation of orphan policies to new servicing agents, providing online customer portals for customers to keep track of their insurance policies, requiring departing agents to serve a notice period. I think I saw one of the suggestions in there to enable a proper handover, training agents on their ongoing servicing obligations, and structuring agent remuneration to incentivize ongoing servicing, not just selling. Now, I'm the first to admit that all of those, apart from the one on remuneration, they address the symptom rather than the cause. They deal with the consequence of high turnover rather than reducing turnover. But I do like what you've got in there, like incorporating a target turnover rate in the formula for determining the remuneration of your agency managers. I saw that was one of your suggestions. I think that's a really good idea. So your district directors and your team leaders are not just having a target recruitment rate as to how many people that they recruit, they have a target turnover rate as well, and that's factored into their remuneration. I would say that that should also be included in the key person in intermediary management's remuneration as well. But let's look at our impossible dream. Yeah, I do want to make this suggestion. I hope that someone in this room one day will go to their board and say, let's stop asking how we recruit more agents, instead say, we've got enough agents, We're now going to invest in them, and we're going to produce a more sustainable, stable, trusted agency force. The insurer who does this, in my humble opinion, is the one who will win in the long run. I lived in Hong Kong for 20 years before I left, so I know the situation, but I do hope that one day, at least one life insurer will realize that it's not just about the sale. Now, the other aspect of the agent business flow that we deal with in Chapter 8 on the subject of ongoing servicing, and which comes under the theme of it's not just about the sale, is policy renewals. And this will be of interest to the general insurers in the room, because by and large, general insurance needs to be renewed every year. So if a general insurance policy is renewed via an insurance agent and the renewal is handled through the agent as well, there are some conduct risks there. It may slip down the priority risk of the agent to send the renewal to the customer, especially if the agent's focused on making new sales rather than renewals, or simply because of the turnover rate, the agent may not be there anymore. So we've got suggested controls in our handbook for this. The most obvious one, send the renewal direct to the policyholder. Yes, copy in the agent, but the easiest thing to do is send the renewal direct to the customer. Give them sufficient advance notice before the expiry of the policy so that they have time to consider the renewal. We suggest at least 6 weeks. We've also got some suggestions if you're not renewing the policy, non-renewal notices. Provide even longer notice in that situation, at least 8 weeks, so at least the policyholder's got a chance to source alternative cover. And I will say that we have seen some bad examples of where insurers carry out mass non-renewals, where they're pulling out of a business line or a particular portfolio. Where we've seen insurers do this, they could have handled it better. They've got to do it in a way that treats customers fairly. So we suggest that you couple the non-renewal with maybe offering a new alternative coverage in these situations. Communicate early, at least 8 weeks in advance. Involve your intermediaries so that they can assist in advising the customer. And it is much fairer to non-renew as policies expire rather than exercising contractual rights to terminate a portfolio of policies mid-term. We don't like to see that. So, if your new regional head, and this is usually what happens, a new regional head is appointed, they come to town and they just say, I don't like this portfolio, cancel it now. If they come to town and they do that, do not listen to them. You have a regulatory obligation to treat your customers fairly in the manner that you exit the portfolio. And if you don't, you're going to have problems in terms of the complaints, the bad press, and from the IA. If your regional head comes to town and says that, bring them down to us. We're happy to talk to them on that. Now, finally, under this theme of it's not just about the sale, I want to say something genuinely positive. I don't live in Hong Kong anymore. But along with the rest of the world, at the end of November last year, we all woke to witness the tragedy of the Wang Fuk Court fire in Tai Po. It's a very tragic, very sad situation. But alongside the sadness, and 8,000 miles away as I was, one couldn't help but be struck by how the whole of Hong Kong mobilized to help, including the insurance industry. Insurance exists for situations like that. Proceeds of claims paid promptly helped people rebuild lives and recover from the seemingly irrecoverable. That resilience, that is the resilience that insurance can bring in the background and without fanfare. And my impression, having read all the press releases and the conversations that I've had, is that the insurance industry, where it was able to, made special efforts to pay fast. Now, I don't think that you should seek praise for this. It's what insurance should do. I also know that there are some outstanding issues and inquiries going on. But within these four walls, you can take some quiet pride in the way that the insurance industry responded. Nothing reinforces trust in insurance quite like insurance doing what it is there to do. And so within these four walls, I hope you will accept my praise as an objective bystander who looked on from overseas. And I hope you will allow me to reflect that praise by presenting a special edition of our handbook, which we have. Now, before I move on from this point, this is a training session, so I also want to highlight a lesson drawn from the way that claims were handled on this matter. Of course, many of you paid quickly because you waived the usual requirements in the claims process, and that willingness to take that risk in a high-profile, tragic situation was very creditable. And it is appreciated that one can't expect that kind of response for every claim. But I also know from my very reliable sources that there were some insurers who did not sacrifice their claims handling processes and principles, but they were still able to make the claims decision and pay as fast as everyone else, particularly on home contents insurance. They assessed the claims quickly, and in that analysis, they decided the covered peril was clear, the extent of the damage was obvious, and exceeded their limits, and this was sufficient information to make the decision to pay. Those insurers appreciated that further verification steps were just not needed, and they paid. And in doing so, those insurers displayed the type of best-in-class claims handling that does not need to be confined to high-profile tragedies like this, but can be part of a general approach to claims handling. In fact, that is precisely the approach that I had in mind in which I stated in our May 2023 special edition of Conduct and Focus on Claims Handling. I wrote those words on the slide there, and you'll see that last sentence. It says the insurer must carry out the assessment fairly, only asking for sufficient and not excessive information that is necessary for it to assess the claim in an impartial and objective manner. And that is what I understand certain insurers did, and I know who those insurers are. They did it not for politics, not to look good, but because that's how they always handle claims. And that is claims handling at its absolute best. And that's what we look for in our inspections. So it's a benchmark that all insurers can aspire to. So those are our takeaways on theme 3. I won't go through them. I will let you read them because I think you'll get a copy of the slides. I will move on to our final theme for today, very important theme. It's all about commission. Now, allow me to tell you another story. Cast your mind back. The year is 2011, and the legal team in the insurance group that I work for is having its regional conference in Singapore. So I fly there to meet my colleagues from across the region to bond and build relationships. But before the relationship building can start in the bars and restaurants of Singapore, we've got to sit through the conference itself. And at this conference, one after the other, the heads of the regional business units, the big dogs. They come and give a presentation. And we sit and we listen politely. And at the end of each presentation, they ask any questions from the audience. Now, we were in Asia, and in those days, when they asked for any question, nobody put their hand up. So my regional boss is worried about this because these big dogs are expecting questions. And she looks at me, and I can see what she's saying in her eyes. She's saying, "Peter, you're a Guilo, ask some questions." So me and my Australian colleague, who's the only other Guilo there with me, we take it in turn. So the regional head of property, he gives a presentation, my colleague asks one, the regional head of casualty, I ask one, the regional CFO, he asks, the regional CEO, we both ask because it's the regional CEO and that's the biggest dog of all. And then the final presentation, the regional head of agency. And his presentation is typical. How many thousands of agents we have across the region, how we're looking to grow that number, how we empower them to sell with commission, the campaigns we run, and the challenge we have on agent turnover, the usual flamboyant agency stuff. And he finishes his presentation. Any questions? And it's my turn. And it's the last presentation of the day, and I'm pretty tired, so I say, the first thing that comes into my head, look, if we've got such a turnover problem with agents, why don't we make all these agents employees? Pay them a salary instead of commission, and give them some sense of permanency in their careers? Silence. The regional head of agency looks at me like I'm the dumbest person in the room, and he answers, "Because we want to keep them hungry. A hungry agent is an aggressive agent and will go out there and kill what he needs to eat." Now, he probably didn't know that he was talking to the future head of market conduct at the IA at the time. But his answer has stayed with me ever since because it captures everything that is commercially effective about commission-based remuneration of intermediaries and everything that is problematic with it from a conduct perspective. Now, insurance is one of the most important financial products a person will buy in their lifetime. It's also one of the most difficult financial products to convince a person to buy. It's a product that needs to be pushed onto a customer. And in Hong Kong, insurance agents and brokers, they're the ones that do the pushing. And they're motivated to be pushy by commission. They only get paid if the customer buys. And this has had the desired effect. A lot of people are buying insurance. Hong Kong consistently ranks at or near the top of the charts for global penetration rates and insurance density. And I would also add a personal view on this, another often unmentioned positive impact. The commission-based agency model has created opportunities for a number of people who are not book smart at school. And the Hong Kong education system can be unforgiving on those people. But those guys are street smart. And a number of agents fall within that category, and they've had the opportunity to make very successful careers. So from a social elevation perspective, in my view, that's a good thing. And again, it's all down to commission remuneration. But commission remuneration, paying intermediaries a percentage of the premium for the insurance policies they sell, is also the root cause of many of the conduct problems we see. We can't get away from that conclusion. Aggressive selling. and misleading selling is linked to the hunger to earn commission. That 52% turnover rate is because people are tempted to be insurance agents because of the large commissions that life insurers offer. But then they realize that actually selling insurance is quite tough and they leave the industry. Orphan policies and poor post-sale servicing arise because commission creates an inherent bias of selling over servicing. The cases that the ICAC deal with, upline agency managers diverting business to their downlines to maximize commission, have commission as their root cause. Same with dummy policies. The entire non-compliant broker referral model that I talked about earlier was enabled by upfront massive commissions being paid by life insurers on participating policies, which funded the referral fees and incentivized unlicensed selling using illegal rebates. So, is the answer simple? Ban commission as a form of remuneration for insurance intermediaries. Well, it would be funny if I said yes, isn't it? Yeah. But I don't. I don't believe that. I don't believe commission should be banned. There are regulators in the world who have banned commission, but we as a regulator do not like banning things. We are the regulator of an insurance market, and it's the market dynamic which has dictated that commission is the dominant form of remuneration for intermediaries. But regulation is required to mitigate the impact of imperfections in the market which lead to poor policyholder outcomes, and commission, whilst having certain benefits, is a root cause of many problems. And this is why it's a priority for you, the insurers who pay commission, to comply with the regulatory requirements on commission, and to do so in a way which reduces the risk of all these conduct problems which we see and ensure the customers are being treated fairly. Now, there is a collection of different regulatory and legal requirements on commission that are drawn from common law, agency law, the insurance ordinance, the IA's codes of conduct and guidelines, and broader legislation like the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance. The requirements vary depending on whether the intermediary is an agent or a broker, and the type of insurance, whether life insurance or general insurance, and also within life insurance, whether it's an ILAS product, a participating policy, or some other kind of life insurance. It really is quite a confusing mix of requirements. But we've tried to set all the requirements out clearly in Part 4 of our handbook. And broadly, the requirements fall within these three categories that we see on the slide: disclosure, volume commission, and treating customers fairly. And I will briefly go through these. So category 1, disclosure, which refers to requirements for an insurance intermediary, or in some cases an insurer, to disclose information on commission to policyholders. Now, the two main requirements on disclosure apply only to insurance brokers because of the common law fiduciary requirements that brokers owe policyholders. The requirements are set out in a practice note accompanying Principle 7.1 to the Code of Conduct that we have issued. And the first requirement is that where a broker company receives commission at normal market rates, or normal market levels, I should say, it must disclose to the policyholder the fact that it receives commission. And there's standard disclosure wording in the practice note for this. But if the policyholder then goes and asks for further details from the broker company, then the broker company needs to disclose the amount at that point. And in our inspections, we generally see that broker companies are complying with this minimum disclosure. The second requirement is one that is often overlooked when it comes to disclosure. So the first requirement I just mentioned is to give that standard disclosure if the commission is at normal market levels. But what if the commission that the broker company is getting paid is in excess of normal market levels? Well, technically, it becomes problematic because the broker company will need to obtain full lawful authority from the policyholder. That's prior express written consent to the amount to receive the excessive commission. And if the broker does not do this, but accepts the excessive commission payment, then potentially it breaches Section 9 of the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance, and the insurer that pays that excessive commission may also face difficulties under the PBO. Now, these two requirements beg an obvious question. Where is the line between commission that is at normal market levels for brokers and commission which is in excess of this? There is no hard line between those. In the IA, we don't set any caps or levels for this. But I would suggest that life insurers do need to turn their minds to this issue, especially when setting levels of commission on participating policies sold through brokers running referral models, because the non-compliant models we saw, the commission levels were excessive enough to fund these referral fees to these unlicensed referrers who were doing the mis-selling and were funding the under-table rebates as well. And when you look at what actual services and regulated activities the customer was actually receiving from the broker company itself, on any view, the commissions that you were paying appeared excessive. The commission paid did not reflect the value of the regulated activities being performed by the broker companies, because the broker companies were hardly performing any regulated activities. So I would suggest that you life insurers do need to evaluate whether your commission is excessive as part of your governance process when you're designing your commission levels for broker companies on participating policies. And I'll return to this again shortly. Now, the third disclosure requirement is in relation to Class C products, ILAS and IUL products. For these products, the actual amount of remuneration paid to the insurance intermediary, whether it's a broker or agent, needs to be disclosed in the specific format in the important fact statement and applicant's declarations, which the policyholder is expected to sign. So those are the requirements on disclosure. The second category of requirements on commission is volume commission. This can be dealt with quite quickly. It only applies to broker companies. Volume commission, I think you all know, is where an insurer pays a broker company a bonus level of commission, which is contingent on the broker company placing a target minimum volume of business with the insurer. The conflict of interest this brings about between the fiduciary duties of the broker to the client and the broker's interest in skewing business to the insurer, paying the commission to hit that target level, is deemed so problematic as to be unacceptable. So brokers are banned from accepting volume commission in Hong Kong, and insurers should not be paying this. This prohibition has been in place since April 2006, and it's reinforced in the IA's practice note accompanying Section 7.1 of the Code of Conduct for Brokers. Now, the third category of requirements on commission are grouped under the heading Treating Customers Fairly, and these requirements apply to long-term policies under Guidelines 15 and 16, and also to medical insurance policies under Guideline 31, and they would cover remuneration paid both to brokers and agents. And the requirements here operate in a hierarchy of 3 levels, and this is very important to understand. So the first level you have is a broad principle requiring insurers to factor in the treating customers fairly principle in designing and determining the remuneration they pay intermediaries that arrange long-term and medical insurance policies. At the second level, you then have specific requirements in the IA's guidelines that apply to certain aspects of intermediary remuneration. So for long-term products, there's a specific requirement for an insurer to ensure that there is no misalignment of incentives between the intermediary and the policyholder that would incentivize aggressive selling or mis-selling. There's also a specific ban on indemnity commission in relation to long-term products. Then at the third level, you have specific examples, which are very prescriptive requirements given in the practice notes and FAQs that the IA has issued supplementing the guidelines. And these specific examples, they apply to life insurance. So the ban on indemnity commission is explained in the specific examples as simply being a ban on insurers paying out more in commission than they receive in premium. And the other long-standing specific example is the prescribed smoothing mechanism for commission on ILAS products, where only 50% of the commission can be paid in the first year, with the remainder being spread over the next 5 years. Now, it's imperative that you satisfy all 3 requirements. But I made this point last year. Based on what we see in our inspections, there seems to be a lack of understanding that you have to satisfy all 3 of these requirements. Life insurers, in particular, think they only need to satisfy the 3rd level, the specific examples, and provided they do that, that's okay. And of course, that's quite easy to do because our practice notes and Q&As are nicely targeted, very prescriptive, very specific, so you don't need to use much judgment. You can really apply those robotically. But my message again this year is this: you're wrong. You've got to comply with the broad treating customers fairly principle in level 1 across every aspect of your intermediary remuneration for your life insurance products. And you have to be able to demonstrate how you do this when we ask in an inspection. Now, general insurers, they understand this. They use that broad principle of treating customers fairly to spread the commission they pay on their medical insurance policies, even though there's no specific example requiring them to do that. Now, why do they do this? Because they understand that the value that an intermediary brings to policyholders regarding medical insurance is not just on the sale of the policy, but in assisting the policyholder when they have a claim during the policy term. So spreading the commission across the term of the policy justifies the value of the services that the customer actually receives from the intermediary. That's what general insurers are able to tell us when we ask them. But you life insurers, you're not very good at this still. On your medical policies, you follow what the general insurers do. On your ILAS products, you act like robots and you follow the prescriptive smoothing requirement in our specific examples. But on your participating policies, if you'll forgive me, you've been useless. When we've asked you how you apply the broad principle of treating customers fairly in designing your commission on your participating policies, the answer we invariably get is, we just follow the market. And that doesn't answer the question of how you treat customers fairly. And it's one of the reasons that I think we see a lot of conduct problems on participating policies. And that's also why, as I foreshadowed last year, that we've now had to expand these specific examples in level 3 by issuing our new practice note, July 2025 last year, in which we've set a prescriptive smoothing requirement for participating policies with regular pay. And for these types of policies, no more than 70% of total commission should be paid in the first year, with the remainder being spread evenly over the next 5 years. Just to let you know, my view is that 70% is very generous. I, as the consultant of the IA, was advising 60%, but I'm just a consultant now, so they don't listen to me anymore. There are also exceptions where the spreading requirement can be departed from, provided there are countervailing measures in place for this. These exceptions apply to overriding commissions for agency managers when their downlines arrange a participating policy. Volume commission also paid to agents is another exception. For some reason, which I'm not sure about, participating policies sold through bank assurance channels are also accepted from this, and also policies sold to professional investors. Now, I'm not going to go through the practice note in any detail. It's already very detailed, and it's reflected in Chapter 19 of the handbook, but I am going to say this. There are many who feel that this practice note is a good thing, that it's part of the work that we should be doing as a regulator to mitigate some of the poor conduct events we've been seeing, especially on these referral fees. And there's part of me that agrees with that. Yes, we should have come out with this practice note. But there's part of me that also feels very disappointed that we've had to come out with this practice note. It's like the cashier order example all over again. Life insurers, the ones who pay the most in the industry, failed to follow the core principle of treating customers fairly in designing their commission on their participating policy. And once again, you've delegated your job to us to articulate this spreading requirement for you to follow. So it's as if that practice note is a reward for bad behavior, and I don't like that. And even now, we're seeing some of this bad behavior perpetuating, with some of you guys ignoring the core objective of this practice note, treating customers fairly, by trying to push the limits on the requirements and finding competitive circumventions to drive more volume your way. And here are some of the idiot moves that we've already seen in the market. Idiot move number 1. Since the spreading requirement does not apply to volume commission for agents, why not just increase that element of the commission to circumvent the requirement? Idiot move number 2. Why not just increase the overall commission payable, so even though we're still paying 70%, it's the same amount as when we were paying 100% upfront? That one really is an idiot move. Now, these idiot moves are the type of thing that we would highlight in an inspection report on your culture for your board of directors to see, because they are demonstrative of poor treating customers fairly corporate culture. And what these attempted circumventions show is that there's still a lack of understanding on the fullness of the obligations that you have on your remuneration. You still think that if you comply with just that third level of specific requirements, that's enough, but it isn't. The broad principle of treating customers fairly applies across every aspect of your intermediary remuneration. You've got to demonstrate how your intermediary remuneration satisfies the treating customers fairly principle in level 1. And when in our inspections we ask you how your remuneration structure aligns with the TCF principle, we need you to demonstrate that. We need you to show us how you're complying with that. And showing us how you just comply with the level 3 specific requirements, it's not enough. And also, when you come to the IA, testing the IA's bottom line on the practice note, you know, where the line is on specific requirements, from now on, we're going to ask you back, show us your evaluation on how the overall commission structure that you're proposing aligns with the treating customers fairly principle. And we're going to ask you to produce that before we even talk to you. It's vital that you do this because of the nature of commission, right? And this is the most important thing. Commission is the payment the intermediary receives for the services he provides to policyholders. But even though that payment comes out of the policyholder's premium, the amount of that payment is determined and set by you, the insurer. The policyholder has no say in it. Customers are not part of the discussion on how much commission should be, even though they're the ones ultimately paying it. And that's why regulation intervenes to oblige you as the insurer to factor in the policyholder's interests when determining and structuring the commission you pay your intermediaries. That is the objective of requiring you to demonstrate that you have taken the treating customers fairly principle into account when designing your remuneration. Now, how do you do that? Well, I refer you to Chapter 18 of the handbook, in which we have set out a suggested 4-step evaluation process you can follow. I promised you we're not setting any new rules, so you don't need to follow it. It's just a suggestion, but you do need to do something. You've got to do something more than what you're doing at the moment. The aim of the process is for you to demonstrate that the services provided by your intermediaries to policyholders represent good value for the commission being paid. That's the point. If you, as an insurer, can justify that the commission being paid to your intermediaries, funded by your policyholders, represents good value for the services actually being provided by the intermediary to the policyholder, then you have justified that the policyholder is being treated fairly. There's no longer any excuse for avoiding this. General insurers have proven it can be done. The handbook gives you a 4-step process. And for those of you who still find it daunting to write these evaluations, use AI, for God's sake. The barriers are gone. And I tell you this, okay, I make you this promise. The first life insurer who shows us a substantive evaluation demonstrating that the commission they pay on their participating policies represent good value for the services their intermediaries provide to policyholders will be the insurer that we trust the most. And a regulator that trusts you is something of considerable value to your management. So that is your challenge, ladies and gentlemen. You like to compete with each other? Go and compete over that. And I look forward to seeing which one of you is going to be the true leader, the true first mover in this market on that. So those are our 4 takeaways from our theme today. I won't go through them because I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. I'll just move straight to the end because we've come to the end, and I want to leave you with these 4 key takeaways. First, design your controls to protect your customers first and foremost. If you do this, protection for your company and your intermediaries will follow. Second, a treating customers fairly culture is your strongest control. It underpins the entire intermediary governance framework. You, as the key persons, must role model that. If you don't live it, your agency hierarchy won't either. Third, sales practices require a genuine assessment of a customer's circumstances and fully informed customer decisions, so craft your controls and your training to achieve that. And finally, you need to demonstrate that your intermediary remuneration represents good value for the services they provide customers. We need to see that documented. How you do these is up to you. But if you need guidance, you have the handbook we have written for you to help you be the best version of the key persons that you can be. never underestimate the importance of the role that you perform as key persons in intermediary management. Your work is vital for the insurance market, and the insurance market is vital for Hong Kong. I want to thank you for the work that you do and for the privilege of allowing me to having conducted this training today. And let me leave you with these 3 thoughts. Ethical leadership breeds ethical culture. Be trustworthy in everything that you do, and keep the treating customers fairly principle as your guiding star. If you do, I promise you, the IA will be your friend and partner, not your prosecutor. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you, Peter.